ain't real shit anymore.
You have to have these difficult conversations.
So the movement is about equality.
That was a really intense debate.
Let's just keep it strictly about facts and we'll be good.
I mean, this is a verbal fight. I mean,
it is.
We invite you to be a part of the league and participate in actually debating.
Can you hear me now?
Good evening, Great Debate League. My name is Ebony Johnson. I am your host and moderator for the evening. Welcome to GDL 23. We are talking about charter schools tonight. And our premise for tonight's debate, we'll bring that up on screen here shortly, but specialized choice charter schools have a positive impact on education for Black children. The definitions that we will use tonight: a choice school is a school choice allows public education funds to follow students to the schools or services that best fit their needs. Charter schools, a public school operated independently of the local school board, often with a curriculum and educational philosophy different from the other schools in the system. Positive impact, beneficial influence, favorable effect. Arguing the affirmative. Thank you so much. Again, our premise is specialized choice charter schools have positive impact on education for Black children. Arguing the affirmative, Drew Lindsay. He is a father of 3, musician and producer, and professor of writing and literature and music from Toledo, Ohio. Hi, Drew.
Hello.
Arguing the negative, Katina K. Taylor. She is a JD, educator, CEO, and founder of Dreams Consulting KC from Kansas City, Missouri. And you'll see there she is. There's Katina. So these are our debaters for tonight. And for everyone watching, it's been a minute, but we will refresh you and let you know there is no profanity. There's no interrupting of any kind. And each debater has the ability to call a fact check timeout if they believe their opponent is saying something that is unfactual. We will start with round 1, which is our opening statements. Each debater has 3 minutes for an uninterrupted opening statement. Drew Lindsay, arguing the affirmative, you will go first, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Hello, everybody. I live in Milwaukee, and in Milwaukee, Milwaukee is the birthplace of the school choice movement. When Bruce initially posted this premise, I asked that choice be included with charter. I've been in this debate countless times, and we can throw links at each other all day in different studies talking about whether choice or charter students perform better, and I'm aware of lots of those studies, and we might get into some of that. I have some studies to support my case if need be, but that's not the case that's not the facts that I would like to lay out for you here today. First of all, if you're at home watching, I know we have people of lots of different backgrounds and opinions here, so if you could just make a note, I would like you to write down or just think, do you believe in systemic racism? And by systemic racism, I mean, when we talk about systemic racism, we don't mean that the people involved in it are necessarily racist. They obviously might be. What we mean is that the system itself is racist. Produces disparate negative outcomes towards members of a particular race. One thing that I am going to, the main thing I'd like to prove today, I have 2 main points, I suppose. First of all, if you tried your hardest, I don't think you could produce a more systemically racist system than public education in the United States. If an alien landed here and they asked what systemic racism was, and I explained how public education worked. As a matter of fact, let's say I explain a little short history of America. African Americans were enslaved in this country. Then after they were freed, we gathered them all in. We did not allow them to purchase homes outside of a certain area. We drew lines around a certain area. We said they all had to stay here. And then we funded our education system. We created a public education system by zip code. Education by zip code is a systemically racist program. And I'm going to point out that the outcomes, not the people, not anyone involved, not public teachers who I love, not any of those people, who I'm sure most of them have the best interests of kids in mind. None of them are necessarily racist, but the system itself is. And what we need is dramatic change. And so the outcomes are undeniable. And what I think is also undeniable is that the fastest way to produce dramatic change is choice or charter.
Thank you so much, Drew. We appreciate your opening statement. And now we will hear from Catina Taylor, arguing the negative. Catina, you have 3 minutes for your uninterrupted opening statement, starting now.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. As previously stated, my name is Catina Taylor, a Kansas City native, but more importantly, an education professional that has been in and out of classrooms for the last 23 years. So I just wanted to start by letting you know the framework from which I am coming from to approach this subject. And so on to my, hopefully, opening statement here. Changing from my computer to my phone has caused a bit of a snafu, but we're going to work it out. Basically, your decisions are only as good as the choices you think you have. As a parent, we want what's best for our children. For the last several decades, that has not necessarily been public schools. So when offered an opportunity or a perceived opportunity to have something different, and or what great marketers tell you is a better choice, then you'll choose anything rather than the best thing, and certainly not remain in the worst thing. While the data supports the notion that school choice may be highly favored by Black families here in 2023, I think that the data gives us much more information about the inability for the current public school system, mind you, charters are public schools as well, to meet the expectations that we have set up for our children and their success. The performance data tells us that once enrolled, our children are not doing better academically, socially, emotionally, or in other areas as well. Families soon learn that what has been promised to them isn't actually realized. They learn that if their child has an exceptional education, diagnosis, or label of any kind, they may not receive services. They learn that if they have locks, like me, they may not be able to graduate or attend prom. They learn that discipline is not equitably enforced. So a choice doesn't mean the best choice, and it certainly isn't for Black families. Choice may be better for Black families if they were designed like our founding HBCUs, or maybe if they looked like the schools founded and run by the Panthers. Maybe they'd even look better if they looked like those run by pioneers like Marva Collins. But that isn't what's happening. I'm excited for tonight. Thank you all for joining in. Let's get started.
Thank you, Catina. We appreciate you for that opening statement as well. So you've gotten a little taste of where the debaters are coming from. And now we're going to allow them to get into it, like really get into it. This is our lightning round. Both debaters will share a total of 15 minutes where they will interrogate each other. And we're hands off. As long as we can hear each other, we're good. But both of you are free to ask questions, to answer questions, to counteract, etc. in these 15 minutes. You may start the lightning round now.
I'll yield to the gentleman who's making the assertion that school choice is better for Black families.
Great, thanks, Katina, and appreciate being here with you. One thing I wanted to know if we could establish is, again, I want to know. I want you all to know I've worked in public schools, and I have highest respect for many people that work in public schools. I wanted to know if we could start from a baseline of agreement that for, let's just say, at least 50 years, the outcomes of public schools are terrible.
I'd say that for the last 100 years, absolutely.
Agreed. And will we both agree that the outcomes for poor and then particularly Black students are even worse than the generally deplorable conditions, like sort of outcomes of public schools?
The system does what the system does. It was designed that way.
Agreed. Well, then we are starting off in a significantly greater point of agreement than I thought. So my question to you is, sometimes I feel like we can fast forward past this, past some of this sort of initial stepping stones and say, it sounds to me as if you're saying, you mentioned like disparate disciplinary things and equity and so forth. Like, if I'm not mistaken, in public schools, I'm skipping past it. Black students are more likely to attend high poverty and racially segregated schools. So schools themselves are more likely to be segregated in public schools than white students. Black students are inequitably disciplined and suspended from school at disproportionately higher rates. This is in public schools. I think that, am I seeing here, the gap for college attainment rates, 26% of Black Americans ages 25 and older have attained a bachelor's degree, while the national average is 26%.
Well, Drew, I don't think what we're arguing is how destructive and how poorly public schools have performed over the last 100 years. We both have agreed that they have not served any students well. But you are positing an opinion that school choice, meaning charter schools, private schools that are paid for through vouchers, religious-based schools, some virtual schools, because all of that falls under school choice, are actually solving the problems that you stated from public schools. But the data clearly shows us that charter schools, in particular, when we start talking about school choice, actually mirror what's been happening in the public school system, the district schools, I should say, versus the charter schools. They're not outperforming in many areas. They're not outperforming them academically. They have the same high rates of suspensions. You have a lack of cultural responsiveness, pedagogy. You are still having 85% white teachers in the classrooms in front of children that don't look like them. In those schools, because they are opened in racially segregated areas, remain racially segregated. See, here's the thing. A rising tide raises all boats, right? And if school choice, i.e. charters, private schools, parochial schools, were better for Black children, they'd be better for all children. But the legislation only allows them to open up in already communities that have been divested in. So why aren't they being open in white areas, urban or rural areas, suburban areas, if they're so great, if they're serving all children well? They're not good for any students.
I'm sorry.
That's the problem. Yeah, they're not good for any students. And it's a failed experiment, and we need to call it that rather than to continue to seek or feed in resources that actually take away the traditional public schools, which may actually then be put to good use to improve upon what's happening in the traditional public school versus what's currently occurring in our charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, etc.
Understood. So we are in agreement that public schools for 100 years have been horrible, and they have been horrible in particular to poor and minority students, correct?
We've said that.
So I want to just make sure I understand what you're saying is that the way to improve what seems like a very century-old insurmountable problem, okay, is to transform the entire education system.
Absolutely.
So you have confidence that we can initiate dramatic change in public schools in America. So you think that and now the public school is a political process.
We can't do it through privatization, which is what the school choice reform movement is. We can't do it through the failed experiment of school choice and vouchers. So are you asking me the question of, is it possible in a theoretical framework? Absolutely. Is it possible through school choice, school reform as we currently know it today? Absolutely not.
Okay, let me, if you don't mind, if I could separate two things. You've said some things about choice and charter students and their effectiveness, which I'd like to talk about in 1 second. But backing up, you think that based on the past 100 years where nothing has changed, and as a matter of fact, where things have only gotten worse, you have faith that through the current processes, which is a political process where we need to elect leaders and leaders need to work and negotiate with union leaders, and you have faith that that process is going to produce dramatic change, the type of dramatic change?
I didn't put forth a process. What I said was, and let's be really clear, theoretically and philosophically, is it possible to change the trajectory of this system? Yes. Is it possible through school choice, which is what you are arguing? Absolutely not. Am I saying keep the framework of the traditional public school system? I did not say that either.
Okay.
If we have the wherewithal as citizens, then we have the fortitude to change it. Can we resurrect what Panther schools look like? Absolutely. Can we look at the Marcus Garvey schools in LA? Absolutely. Can we look at what Marva Collins did in a one-room schoolhouse? Absolutely. Can we go back to immediately looking at after Emancipation Proclamation, we were able to close the literacy gap for African-American families from almost a 0% rate to 70%, when we had mixed-use schoolrooms and learning happening in shacks, outhouses, in fields? Absolutely. We can change the trajectory of education. Did I say that we're going to dump resources in the traditional public school system? I absolutely did not.
Okay, but what I'm trying to ask right now, since we are debating public schools versus choice and charter.
Actually, what we're debating is school choice is the best choice or a better choice for Black families. That's what we're debating. We never once said, we said school choice, right?
Is it better than what we are talking about? We are comparing that to public schools, correct?
No, we said it has a positive impact on the education for Black children.
Okay.
Does it or doesn't it?
Got it. So like the point is, when we say it has a positive impact, that has to be in comparison to something, or this debate doesn't make much sense. And if we have a disagreement on that, that's fine. So if I could for a second go back, I just want to nail you down on something real quick. The process for public school change is embedded, right? It is a political process where you elect leaders to school boards. There's oversight by elected officials, and those officials negotiate with union leaders, and we are in agreement on that, correct? That
Absolutely.
process is okay. So if you are not comparing choice and charter to public schools, we might be having a sort of a different discussion, but what I'm saying is I have absolutely no faith that dramatic change can occur given the way that public schools are currently constructed. The New York City public school system has 1 million students. Okay, there's a school board that oversees 1 million students. That is a massive behemoth that has been, again, I think we agree on this, for a century, just doing terrible. What's the Chris Rock line that if you fold something wrong at the Gap, you get fired? But only for some reason with this public school system do we keep going on and on. So like, if you're not defending public schools, then I think we're having a little bit of a separate discussion. And I guess one part of my premise is
what we're arguing, and what the premise is that school choice is better for Black families. That's very simple. And I don't think you necessarily need to compare it to the traditional public schools. Does it have a positive impact on the education of Black children or not? period.
Understand that. We will throw that out to the listeners and the debaters. To me, this question makes sense. I'm comparing traditional public schools because what other options do Black children have currently right now? What other options do they have? Are you talking like
they have homeschool options? They have module learning. They have whatever choice they so choose, right? What other options? You're acting as if the only choice or the only option for Black families is a traditional public school setting, and that is not necessarily the case.
Well, I'm acting that way because
now I would say that 8 million. I would say 8 million.
99.5% of all school children are either going to be in public schools or in one of these choice charters. So
but we see a mass exodus. We see a mass exodus. And so what we see a large number of Black families doing now is actually resurrecting models that look a little like the Black Panther model, or homeschooling models that look like unschooling, right?
Got it.
So we have to know what's happening. Do we have 8 million children that get up every single day, specifically Black children, and don the doors of a structural or a more traditional public school setting? Absolutely. Do they have to? No, they absolutely do not. But is school choice in its current form better for Black children? The answer to that is absolutely not. We see it every single day, news article after news article. The academics are not changing. And I don't care if you look at a conservative research study, I don't care if you look at a liberal research study. The data is clear that the academic performance for Black children, if they're in a private school, a charter school, if they're doing virtual online, which is choice, as defined in the current 2023 setting, is not showing that our children are faring better in those modes or mediums of education than they were at their traditional public school. So the answer to the question is it does not have a positive impact. And when we send our Black children to some of those schools, they actually are traumatized even more. There's a trade-off to their social and emotional well-being.
But can I ask you, so you and I can right now go back and forth. I disagree that you're saying the data is clear. But one thing I think I'm happy to just proceed forth with, I think you said just a couple minutes ago that the data shows that there's not much difference between choice charter, that the outcomes are basically the same. Is that what you said?
Minimal, minuscule,
okay.
microscopic.
Minuscule. Okay, right. And I will post in the link multiple, but let's just say this right now. Let's just say that I agree with you. Okay, let's just say that ultimately the outcomes between these two things are different. Now, one thing I'm pretty sure you will see is that high school graduation rates and college attendance is higher for students that should go to choice and charter. So let's just say that choice and charter are producing identical outcomes. Okay.
No,
let's just say that
they're not. They're absolutely not. To a certain degree, and especially when you look at Louisiana, when you look at Ohio, when you look at Florida, when you look at Washington, D.C., especially if the choice is private schools for those Black families, they actually are doing worse.
But didn't you just say that the effect was minimal? I want to proceed with a shared basis of facts. Didn't you just say that the difference in outcomes was minimal between choice charter and public schools? Minuscule. Okay, so can we just proceed without, like, we can boast, and I think it should, post links that shows the difference in outcomes between choice, charter, and public schools. If you want to say that the difference between the two in outcomes is minuscule, I am okay with that. Hold on, we lost Katina.
Okay, sorry about that. Katina will likely rejoin us. She probably had some sort of technical situation that occurred. I'm glad that you both were able to start generating and getting into discussion to critique each other's position. Audience, our next round will be audience Q&A. So we're asking for you to submit questions in our comments section. You can type in a question you have for Drew or for Katina, and we'll be able to, we're going to give them 3 questions each. So we'll be able to bring up your questions then and be able to share so that they can each answer whatever questions that you have. While we're waiting on Katina to rejoin us, I also want to thank our parent organization. The Great Debate League would not be here if it was not for Citizens for a Sustainable Future, who are improving Black America to make a better world. Citizens for a Sustainable Future, are better known as CSF, also really highlights economic justice, let me say that, through sustainable, I'm kind of mixing my words with it's a word I want Bruce to come in because it's a word I want to say that's not coming to me. Environmental justice. Thank you. I'm like, come in, Bruce, because it's not coming, but it's all good. Environmental justice specifically for African American communities. And Citizens for a Sustainable Future is a nonprofit organization as well. So thank them for being our parent organization. We also want to thank our audience for participating, listening. We have been gone for a while, and we're back with debaters in a debate. And hopefully, we'll get our negative debater back in. She must really be having a time with her tech, so hopefully, we'll be able to get her back in. We also want to let you know that you can continue to follow us as we're putting on. We have more debates coming up, another one in 2 weeks on April the 27th, again at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll talk more about that one and post for that. Can be on the lookout for that. And then we also have our Facebook group, the Great Debate League. If you're interested in debating, if you know somebody that wants to debate, then feel free to join our league. And we post premises in there to see if people want to take us up on a debate, or you can also post your own premise and try and garner somebody to debate for yourself. In addition to our Facebook group, we have an email address, thegreatdebateleague@gmail.com, thegreatdebateleague@gmail.com, and you can email us there if you're interested in debating as well. So how are you feeling, Drew? I mean, you've gotten some points out, or do you feel like you're expressing what you wanted to express?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you one thing I'm feeling. I'm feeling that there's a surprising level of agreement between Katina and I about a couple things. And the question of whether or not we are comparing to public schools, I think is an important one, which ultimately I guess I will leave up to the listeners. And then, as we all know, in education, 3 minutes and 15 minutes goes very fast. So yes, I wish I had 75 more minutes to talk to Katina.
I know you said you pointed out some things that you're agreeing with. Has anything Katina said changed your mind a little bit from the premise?
No. I think I'll save some of this for a closing statement, but if we are in agreement that public schools have been terrible for 100 years, then I think that helps what I'm about to say. And so and I think Katina, one thing that has interested me is the sort of schools that Katina's appealed to, for an Hampton school and the sort of community-based schools. I guess I'll save my comment on that for my final statements or questions from the audience.
Well, what we're going to do now is we'll move to audience Q&A. I know Katina is attempting to get back in. I believe she is here now. Okay.
I apologize. I'm so sorry. My phone died. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry.
You're good. What we'll do is allow Shala, I'm not sure exactly where we left off, but given the time, let's allow for about 2 more minutes of the lightning round, and then we'll move to audience Q&A.
Got it. And Katina, you may have gotten cut off. So did you get cut off in the middle of trying to say something?
I think you were reiterating your point about the performance of our students, whether they're in traditional public schools or school choice options. I'll say that.
Yes.
Be it private schools, charter schools, parochial schools,
right.
voucher-based systems. The thing is, depending on where they are and state to state, that data varies. But
absolutely agree.
For sure is when we look at Louisiana, when we look at Iowa, when we look at Florida, when we look at Washington, D.C., especially if their choice is private schools, then the data is telling us that they're actually doing worse. than if they were in their traditional public school setting.
Okay. I disagree with that. I am more happy to proceed because, there's a thing in this debate format where you and I could go back and get into the weeds and share studies and things like that. I've got data that I could quote that, first of all, charters are extremely possible. Choice schools are extremely possible. Charters and choice schools are more diverse and less segregated than public schools. They have higher graduation rate, blah, blah, blah. I'm happy to proceed with the idea that the difference right now in the data is minuscule between public schools and choice charter. Like the outcomes are relatively, I'm happy to proceed with that.
Therefore, they wouldn't be a benefit to the Black families that attend.
Well, that is where we are going to strongly disagree. That is where we're going to strongly disagree. But you know what I mean? Like, because the outcomes thing is important first. And so without getting into the weeds,
that's the most important thing, right? Favorable effects, beneficial influence.
Absolutely.
Are my kids, the kids that look like me, my 3 grandchildren, if I made a choice, right, to send them to a charter school, to a parochial school, to a private school, to a virtual school, would they do better? Would it have a positive impact on them versus their traditional public school setting? And if
your argument right now is
academically, if they're not thriving socially and emotionally, if they're getting suspended more, if there's no culturally responsive pedagogy, they are not doing better. It does not have a positive impact on them.
I have a problem with that. Are we saying they're not doing better, or are we saying the effects are minuscule?
All right, we'll just leave it there.
Okay.
We're going to now go. Thank you both for that lightning round. And thanks so much, Katina. We're glad you were able to come back. We're going to go to our audience Q&A. We will ask each debater 3 questions. Those can be shared or distinct. So we will let you know. But each question, debaters, you will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer. The first question, and I believe this may be going to both debaters. Bruce, please type in. If not, I'm not able to look at anything else right now. How do charter schools impact funding for public schools, particularly in areas where there are already limited resources? We will give this one first to Katina Taylor. Katina, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
It depends. There is no continuity across the 50 states as it relates to funding of charter schools. Now, keep in mind that charter schools are also public schools. In most states, the funding is taken from the traditional public school districts, a portion of it, a percentage of that, and they then have to pay the per pupil allotment for the charter schools that operate in their particular area. The charter schools will argue that they are not getting fair funding. Well, if you're privatized and you have private dollars, find your own funding. I, as a taxpayer, don't want my dollars diverted to a charter school that is underperforming the traditional public school sector. So the answer to that is it really depends state by state.
Okay, thank you, Katina. Same question for you, Drew. How do charter schools impact funding for public schools, particularly in areas where there are already limited resources? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
The most important thing that I want to state, which I think Katina's already agreed to, the most important thing is that public education is the funding, the system by which we ensure that all citizens get an education. Charter is public schools. Choice is public schools. Those are the only, when we talk about traditional public schools, that is a process and a system that is political. Choice and charter are both public schools. Like public schools, you lose funding when a student walks out of your school because they don't want to be there. That's when public schools lose funding. The difference between a public school and a charter school is the charter school or a choice school, if they lose students, public schools have all sorts of just guaranteed money that come in. Public charter schools only will exist if parents actively choose to send their children there. So the question, how do schools impact funding for public schools? They will impact funding if parents voluntarily choose to send their students to a choice or to a charter. Again, I want to reiterate, that is just another form of public education, okay? That is, we can't think of public education as only this one process. What we are debating is the best way to educate children, Okay. The funding, the argument for choice in charter is that the funding should follow the student. The funding should follow the parent. The parent should choose. Every kid in Milwaukee, they go to a $14,000 private school. That's the per pupil allotment for public school funding. Ask yourself if you have a kid in public schools like you are, I'm sorry, time.
All right. All right. Thanks so
All right.
much, Drew. I appreciate your passion. Okay. Our next question. Charter schools often rely on lottery systems to determine which students are admitted, while public schools typically serve all students in a particular area. How does this impact student diversity and integration? Drew, we'll let you go first. Again, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
If I define systemic racism, it would be education by zip code. Okay. Public schools are more segregated than choice and charter schools. Okay. That is like if you grow up in a all black neighborhood, chances are your local public school is going to be all black. Okay. Relying on lottery systems. So the idea, how does this impact student diversity and integration? Choice and charter, I can post this link, but charters serve more diverse students, okay? Traditional public schools, 52% white, charter schools, 35% white. Traditional public schools, 15% black, charter schools, 28% black, okay? Charter schools are more diverse, and most importantly, they attain that diversity only by choice, okay? If you would like your child to stay in a mainly black, school, you have that option. Right? If you would like to send them to a different school for any other reason, you have that option. So student diversity and integration is more diverse in choice and charter, and it's by choice.
Thank you so much, Drew. Same question to you, Katina. Charter schools often rely on lottery systems to determine which students are admitted, while public schools typically serve all students in a particular area. How does this impact student diversity and integration? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. So remember that I said at the outset that most school choice options are located in urban areas, especially if we're talking about charter schools. The pool of students is the pool of students. So if you go into any charter school in my local community, it looks just like the public schools in my local community. There is little to no diversity because of where they're situated. And that has been done on purpose, right? So the diversity, it doesn't matter. It depends on where, and again, now I will say that there is no monolith here, right? We're talking about 50 states that have very different legislation in every single one of those states, different populations and things of that nature. What I will say is this is something to consider around student diversity in charter schools, is if the moment a particular charter school starts serving BIPOC children well, what you see is more and more white families enter the lottery, and the seats end up going to the white families, and the numbers shift dramatically where those schools become predominantly white versus serving those we say need it most.
Can I get a supporting
No.
fact on that? No, I mean a fact. We don't have to stop it, but just as a note, I was.
I can't hear you, Drew.
I was wondering, I don't mean to stop the process for a fact check, but I was looking for a citation on that last point because we have pretty clear data about the diversity differences between these two schools. So that is a point that I'm just asking. And we can do it later. You could just send it later. I don't even care.
You want to know. Okay, well, we'll see if Katina is able to send that. Okay, and this is the final question for you, Drew. Can you give the stats to show that charter, and this is from Shala McDonald. Thank you, Shala. Can you give the stats to show that charter schools have better outcomes for Black children? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yep. And okay, so this is going to be a terrible babbling of facts here because I did not print my notes out before this thing, which the debaters know. First of all, I want to say this. I'll address this in my closing statement, but I'm happy to proceed with what Katina said, that the outcomes are fairly similar between these two things. But having said that, charter outcomes, students in urban areas do significantly better in school if they attend charter schools than if they attend a traditional public school. A random controlled study of charter schools in New York City by Stanford researcher found an even larger effect. On average, a student who attended charter school for all grades would close about 86% of the achievement gap in math and 66% of the achievement gap in English. A comparable group of lotteried out students who remained in regular Chicago public schools, students in charter schools outperformed them by 5 to 6 percentage points. One thing that I want to say, I will post links in the thing. What I'm happy to say right now, and someone agree with Katina, is I want to just, as we move toward the final round, I want to say, let's say for now that the outcomes are fairly similar. And let's say, I think Katina already agreed for this, that one difference you note is that charter and choice students have higher graduation rates, higher college attendance rates, and also lower crime rates, as a matter of fact. I don't know if Katina would agree to that one. I think she agreed to the issues on. So I'm happy right now. Sorry, I'm happy to rest on the graduation and college attainment rates for right now.
Okay. And Katina, we'll ask you the same question in a different way. Do you have stats that provide counter evidence that support your argument that charter schools do not have better outcomes for Black children? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
You can look at the Education Commission of the states, and you can also look at the Economic Policy Institute. Both of those have reports on school choice that actually tell us, as it does Harvard actually as well, that actually tell us that charter schools are not great for Black children, BIPOC children. If you're not familiar with that acronym, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, I'll put it like that. So we're talking about immigrant and refugee families. We're talking about Latinx folks. We're talking about anybody of color that chooses generally choice. They are not doing better. And those three, for example, point out that data that says they are not doing better.
Okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate our audience for posing questions and our debaters for asking questions. We're now answering questions. We're now going to move to closing statements. Each debater will have 3 minutes uninterrupted for their final closing statements for their arguments on the premise for tonight. We will start with Drew. You have 3 minutes for your closing statement. Drew, unmute yourself. You're muted.
4 seconds back. No, I'm just kidding. We can both share links back and forth that talk about outcomes. The reason why I said I'm happy to agree that there is similar outcomes between the two, which I think Katina's agreed to many times, but then has suggested that there is substantially different outcomes. That confuses me. I'm happy to agree with the minuscule outcomes or minuscule difference for this reason. I want all of you to ask yourself, do we need dramatic change? Dramatic, fundamental, altering, paradigm shifting change in education based on the outcomes that we've both agreed are just awful for a century? If so, okay, the one question I have, the thing that has blown my mind about Katina, she talked about Fred Hampton schools, talked about homeschooling, all these differences. That's what school choice is. Why would you want to go to a school system in the year of our Lord with Ron DeSantis as governor? Why are you choosing a school system that by definition, Ron DeSantis gets to come in and say, you cannot talk about any of this, to a school system that says that parents get to choose where Dr. Bruce can go open a school tomorrow on environmental justice. And if students choose to go there, choice dollars follow. Fred Hampton, Black Panthers can open a school tomorrow. And if students choose to go there, they follow. Why on earth? Let me just step back from the question. If we want dramatic change, if you want change to benefit a specific community, it blows my mind. The one thing I thought would be good about Trump is we would start to realize, let's stop giving more power to the government. Public school system is run by the government, okay? It is run by the government and teachers unions, and it is extremely hard as a result to affect change. That should be, I can't imagine there would be anyone that would disagree with that. There are 55,000 students in the New York, or teachers in the New York school system, and they fire about 12 a year. You cannot affect change in that system. And if you don't believe me, just look at the last 100 years. Do you know what would immediately affect change is a dramatic embrace by all communities of choice, meaning anyone that wants to start a school. It's like the difference between food stamps, if the government running all grocery stores, or the government just giving poor people money to go buy food where they want to buy. Okay, if you want to affect change, why on earth are you buying into a system that Ron DeSantis is in control of? If anyone can answer that question for me to my satisfaction, I will stop arguing, right? But in this year, where you are seeing Ron DeSantis say no one can talk about critical race theory or anything like that, time is up.
Thank you Thank you so much, Drew. We appreciate it. We appreciate your passion and your argument. And now we will have a closing argument from Katina Taylor, who is arguing the negative. Katina, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to close this out. I don't think we ever got to the actual argument that school choice presents a better option for Black families, that it has a positive influence on their children, whom they love, right? And so one of the things that I heard mention was that all schools are the traditional public schools are run by the government. All schools are run by the government. Let's be clear. It's really interesting that well-meaning liberals often have this argument, or maybe conservatives, have this argument around less government, and the well-meaning, they have the savior complex, right? And so we wouldn't have vouchers, we wouldn't have school choice if legislation didn't make it so. So again, to my initial point, all schools are run by the government. Next, I want to say this: choice. Your decisions, as I said before, are only good as the options that you have available before you. If you don't know what to do and you're presented with something pie in the sky by good marketing and promotion, you will make that choice. It happens every day on TV. And that's exactly what charter schools and school choice programs have the option to do. They go into communities that are suffering and that have been suffering, and they paint a picture and make a lot of promises that they can't deliver on. I will tell you this, as I mentioned before, the data is there. Black students in particular, I'll say BIPOC students, students of color that find themselves making the choice, become very transient because they're consistently seeking out the next great thing, the best opportunity. And because they're transient, that tells us that they are not getting what they need when they make a choice. And that's just the bottom line. We have, yes, they have a lottery system and they say they have an open enrollment process. But guess what? They have zero tolerance policies so that they can get any student that they perceive to be a problem that generally looks like me out of their school. They don't have the necessary resources to serve a student that may have special needs. So the student that has a diagnosis that looks like me, guess what? They're not in that school. Their social and emotional well-being is not taken into consideration when 85% of the teachers across the board, whether they're in a traditional public school, a charter school, or a private school, does not look like me. So I don't know, where we get the data that if you go to a traditional public school, that you're more apt to be in a school that's all Black. No, not necessarily at all. I have talked to countless individuals over the last 10 to 15 years that tell me they never had a Black teacher. And all of us know that the teacher in the front of that classroom has more of an impact on a student than anybody else or anything else. I saw time come up, so I stopped.
I don't know what's happening.
But I will keep talking.
All right, sorry, something was happening with our tech. Sorry about that. What a night we've had with tech. But we appreciate you both as educators for working with us. Thank you so much, Drew Lindsay and Katina Taylor, for participating in Debate with the Great Debate League. I want to quickly say to our audience, don't turn away, because we do have a scorecard. We want you to it's about 2 minutes to briefly score each debater so that they can have the feedback of how they did, and we'll determine who tonight's winner was. After this broadcast, we will restart another broadcast in a few minutes. So however you're watching now, stay with us. We'll just close this one out and start another one for post-debate analysis. But we have posted in the comments section the form for you to easily fill out the scorecard for the debaters. So we ask that you please take the time for that feedback so that we can share it with them. We also, again, would like to invite you to participate in debate with us if you like by joining our Facebook group, The Great Debate League, or sending us an email, thegreatdebateleague@gmail.com. Thank you again to our debaters, Drew Lindsay and Katina Taylor. We appreciate y'all for rocking out with us and holding it down because we had a night, but we appreciate all of the information that you shared. I do want to note for the audience, in case you've been following along and said, what happened to Drew's fact check? We did look into it. We found some links, but what we're going to do is just ask, like, Katina, if you have a link that you want to share that answered Drew's question, but we'll also be able to post. I think we can post later comments too, and maybe in the post debate analysis, we can post in the comments as well there.
What was the question that you all needed a link for?
Drew, if you could reiterate that.
There was I'm going to maybe muddy it a little bit. There was numerous, we had results. Oh yeah. There was ideas that Black students came into charter schools and then moved on, so that they all, as soon as charter schools started doing well, they ended up all white. And I was asking, how did that compute with the data that I thought we both agreed on, that charter schools, the public schools were more segregated than charter and choice schools. Okay, which I have data for.
That's a totally different question though, right?
Well, we'll talk offline then. But thank you to everybody for participating and watch us. Always remember to speak the truth. Have a good night, everybody.